Today I would like to take some time to discuss a couple of new enhancements for mill and router Mastercam 2018. The first enhancement has to do with the contour toolpath and cut order control related to depth cuts and multipasses. We will start off with some simple examples, and as we get going we will progress to more complex examples. This functionality is a big change, and there is a lot we can do with it depending on the combination of certain settings. Before we start, I want to go over some basic terminology to cover what makes up these toolpaths. When you chain something, we consider this a single chain that makes up one contour. This is a contour toolpath that can machine many contours, so we can have more than one chain if we desire, and each chain is referred to as a single contour. We also have depth cuts. Depth cuts are taken in the Z direction. This is a depth cut, and then this is a depth cut, and this is a depth cut here. In this example, within each depth cut, there are passes. Sometimes there are single pass, and sometimes, like in this example, there can be multiple passes. Depth cuts are controlled on the depth cut page. This page describes the step down in the Z direction. In this case, it's a 1/2 inch down for each depth cut. Since I have multi-passes on, I have multiple passes at each depth in the X or Y direction. So if I turn multi-passes off, I will have one pass at each depth. So 4 depth cuts on the single contour, each depth cut taking one pass. If I turn multi-passes on, we will see multiple passes at each step down location as shown. In Mastercam 2018, you now have far greater control on how to order these passes and contours and these depths. You will notice there's new functionality in Mastercam 2018 on the Multipasses page. In previous versions of Mastercam, we had the concept of machine finish pass at final depth or at all depths. This section in Mastercam 2018 has been expanded into the finish pass section. Those two options still exist, as well as 2 new options. In the previous version, keep tool down was available, as it is still available in 2018. Machine finish passes after roughing all contours is new. Now you can choose if you have multiple contours to do all the roughing motion first, then come back and do the finish passes once the roughing has been completed, with whatever parameters have been established under the finish passes. In previous versions, you could run the rough, then finish motion, but if you had multiple contours, you could only rough a single contour and then perform the finish pass on it. And then the next contour, it would do the rough and then finishing passes. In 2018, we can perform only the rough multi-passes on all the contour chains, representing all of the contours, and then come back and do the finishing on all of the contours. Off to the right side, you will see a couple of new options that were not there in previous releases. Multipass Order and Rough Pass Cut Direction. Multipass Order controls the cut order of all the multi-passes. Rough Pass Cut Direction controls if the rough multi-passes are going to be one-way or zigzag. So previously, if I had multiple rough cuts, like in this example here, with 3 of them, all I could ever do is climb mill. I couldn't come across and then conventional mill them back. So now we can accomplish this using zigzag. On the depth cut page, we continue to support by contour and by depth. So this will perform all the step downs on each depth before moving to the next chain or contour. The other option, by depth, allows you to perform the first depth cut, which is the first step down on here on all the chains, and then we will step down to the second depth and make the cut on all the contours or chains. Using these 2 settings in combination with the settings found on the Multipasses page can make for some interesting cut order. You will also notice new options for Mastercam 2018 found under the depth cut direction. Step down cuts from the top down. Step up cuts from the bottom up. So let's take a look at these settings now and see how they can influence the cut order. The first example here is simple. Nothing is set up here different than in a previous version. We have contour selected, which was the only option available in previous releases. One way is set, and finish passes will take place at all depths. I only have one chain, so changing the depth cut order on the depth cuts page won't influence the toolpath. So if we look at the toolpath, what we are getting here is 3 rough passes and then 1 finish pass. I have set 1 finish pass at all depths. That means I'm stepping down 1/2 inch, and at each of those step downs there will be a finish pass. You can see that pass here with the tight pass close to the wall of the part. Now let's go back into the parameters and go to our MultiPasses page. If I say final depth and hit the preview update button here, you will see it's going to rough all this out and then do a single finish pass, taking care of the wall using the entire flute length of the tool. And we could always do this type of motion in previous releases. In Mastercam 2018, there's some new functionality. We are taking a pretty aggressive step down of 1/2 inch. Maybe I want to take some smaller finish passes and I don't want them to step down so deep. So if I select the option defined by rough depth cuts, this gives us 2 options. The first option, add between, will add more step downs for the finish passes. Or I can set this to per number of and choose which rough pass depth location the finish pass will be performed at. So let's start with add between and say add 2 passes. You can see the 3 rough multi-passes and the finish pass associated to that level or Z depth right here. And here there are 2 finish passes between the top of stock and that depth cut. You can see it added 2 finish passes above the rough multi-pass. So again here, you can see the 3 multi-passes, and then you can see the 2 finish passes added above the rough multi-pass. This will continue all the way down to the finish depth. This allows you to take lighter finish passes once you've roughed away the material. Back to the parameters. If I now change this to per number and set the number to 2, this will add a finish pass to every second rough depth. So you can see I've got the 3 rough multi-passes with no finish passes, and then I've got the 3 rough multi-passes and a finish pass. So it's added a finish pass to the second depth multi-pass rough step. So it's taken a finish at every second step down. Those 2 options are new to Mastercam 2018, and they allow you to add more finish passes or choose to take the finish passes at specific multi-pass rough passes. Now let's talk about cut order. So right now I have this set to by contour, which would be per chain, and I'm going one way. So if I were to backplot this toolpath right now, it would look very straightforward. As soon as we add another chain into the mix, a few things come into play. Again, I said contour, right? So it's going to finish the contour before moving to the next contour. Let's jump back into the parameters. Looking at the depth cut page, if we take note, you will see the depth cut order is set to by contour. So let's now go to the MultiPass page and change the Multipass order to by pass and regenerate that operation. Then let's backplot it to see what happens. Since I said by contour for the depth, it has to stay on the first contour and perform the depth cut before it goes to the next contour. But for cut passes, I want to order them not by contour, but by pass. So here's what's going to happen. it's going to step down and take the first depth pass of the next step down, and repeat this until it gets to the final depth. This is because I ordered them by pass. Then it will jump over to the other contour and do the same thing on the other side of the part. So it completed this depth, right? And now the tool is free to move to the next contour and complete the first pass at each step down. This is very important when you are cutting something maybe tall, so you can approach it from the outside and keep the material stable. Now the tool will come back to the first contour and take the second pass and step down. And then it will go to the second contour and take the second pass, and then come back to the first contour and take the third pass, and carry on. Now it's doing the finish passes. If we now go back into the parameters and change the finish pass parameters to final depth and regenerate this toolpath, you'll see it only gives us the finish pass at the final depth. But still cuts each pass at the depth cut. Going back into the parameters, we can change the finish pass option to define by rough depths and set it to add between. And you will see the difference in the toolpath. All these finish pass options are taken into account when changing this to by pass. Now if we switch this to by contour and let it run, you will see it does all the rough passes at the first depth of the first contour. Then it does all the finish passes to that first depth. This will repeat until it gets to depth. Now if I wanted to do all the multi-passes and finish passes at the first depth of the first contour, as shown here, and then do the same motion on the second contour, we can do that. So if we jump back into the parameters, this option has nothing to do with multi-passes. So we need to go to the depth cut page. And now we need to set the depth cut order to by depth. So now it will do the first step down on the first contour. Then it will jump over to the second contour and do that same motion. Then it will do the finish motion. This will start from the outside of the part and works its way into the inside of the part. If I don't want to do all the roughing passes on a single side, I can change the multipass order on the MultiPasses page to bypass. This will cut the first multipass of each contour. And then it will cut the finish passes. Next it will do the second pass on each contour. And then proceed to do the finish passes. This will continue on until the final depth. Next, let's change the rough cut direction to zigzag and set the multi-pass order to by contour to see what this does. So now the tool comes across and cuts back across the part on the first contour. Then it will jump over to the second contour and do the same motion. But I don't want the tool to lift up here. So I'm going to go back into the parameters and set the option Keep Tool Down. Now we will get something like this. Then it does the finish passes, and the finish passes will not zigzag. They will still only go in a single direction. We could go back into the parameters and select Machine Finish Passes after roughing all contours. So let's do this and see what we get here. So now you will see zigzag roughing all the way down to the final depth. And then it's going to come back up and finish the walls. This will always follow the rules you have set in the finish passes, no matter what it is set to. These new options for Mastercam 2018 give you lots of different combinations which allow you to control your multi-passes better and depth cuts better than any previous version. The next thing I will show you is new to Mastercam 2018. It is related to a linking function. I will show you this by using a 2D contour toolpath, and what I will be talking about is the new associative option found on the linking parameters page. This allows us to set one of these locations, as an example, a clearance, to a physical point on a physical entity on the screen. And then this value would be an incremental distance away from that point. So for example, I could say I want my clearance to be associated to a point on the solid model, which is, let's say, this pull rod here, and I want my clearance to be 2 inches above the point I select. So no matter where this solid moves, or is edited or scaled, I will always be 2 inches above this physical point. We can set this for clearance, retract, feed plane, top of stock, and depth. These options are available in a number of toolpaths in the mill and router product. Currently what I have set up now is an example with these values being set the way they would be set up in any previous version of Mastercam. The clearance and retract are set to absolute, the feed plane is set to incremental, the top of stock and depth is set to absolute. This is how I can get this toolpath here. When you are working with absolute values, there is no connection with the chains you picked for that toolpath. These chains would be the two bottom edges shown here. So I can do a model prep move function and move the floor down, let's say 7/8, and accept that change. The toolpath reacts because something has changed. The edges we selected have changed. And if I regenerate the toolpath, you will see nothing has changed with the depth because we had the depth set to an absolute value. Let's move the floor back to where it was and regenerate the toolpath now. Now, if we want to respect the floor, we can set the depth to incremental 0. And this will set the tip of the tool in the final depth to the edge we selected as the chain. Let's change the retract height to a point a little bit above this edge. And regenerate this toolpath. Now if I do a model prep function and move the floor down again, the toolpath will react both to the chain and the new depth. You will now see the toolpath goes to the new floor depth. The problem is, if we move this face up, let's say 1/4 of an inch, you will see nothing in the toolpath got marked dirty because I didn't select anything related to the toolpath. And you can see the absolute retract value is hurting me now. So now I need to manually edit the retract height. If I were to use, let's say, incremental to get that benefit, you need to remember that it is incremental from the chain location, which is at the bottom of this face. This can make getting a retract value to a safe value difficult. And that's where associative values come into play. I'm going to move this face back down 1/4 inch. Now let's use the associative values. So let's say I always want to be 1/2 inch above a point on the screen for my clearance. And let's say I pick the center of this pull rod here and set that to 1/2 inch. Retract I want to be associated to a location. And now I'm going to pick the middle of this face here and set this to, let's say, 1/4 inch. Feed plane can be incremental above the next depth of cut. That's fine. Top of stock, I also would like that to respect a physical point, and I want this value to be 0. And depth, I want it to be associated to this point here, and set this to 0 as well. So if I regen my toolpath, you will see the depth is set to this plane here. The retract is clearing this face by 1/4 inch, and my clearance is 1/2 inch above this pull stud. Now this toolpath linking parameters are very closely connected to this solid model. So we can go back into the parameters and review exactly where those points are by clicking on this icon. You will see an icon appears on the screen that shows you where those values were picked from. This makes it easy to review and change these points if you need to. So now that I have the linking parameters set up the way I want, let's make some changes to this model. Let's move the floor up here and accept that change. Regenerate this toolpath. You'll see the toolpath updates to that new floor height. This could always be done if we had the depth set to incremental values as shown previously. Now the top of stock and retract heights are set to this face. So let's move this face up. And accept that change and regenerate this toolpath. Now the retract height is respecting this plane like we wanted. The retract is now 1/4 inch above this face. Now let's make an extreme change here. Let's translate this pull rod up into space. And regenerate this toolpath. As you can see, the clearance is still 1/2 inch above the top of that pull stud. So you can see the benefit to these new associative points. They are easy to review and find. They will respect anything you do to a solid model or wireframe geometry. If these points were attached to wireframe geometry and the wireframe was moved, the same behavior would apply. You can translate, scale, and use the model prep function to move the point locations, and the toolpath will behave as expected. So this covers associative points. It's new for Mastercam 2018. You'll see this option on a number of different toolpaths throughout the mill and router products. Hopefully this webinar has been informative and can assist you with your day-to-day programming needs. Thank you.